Well, good evening to everyone. Hope you all are doing wonderful on this evening. I noted beautiful evening earlier, and then I realized this may not be beautiful for everybody where you're at, as I see some are in Waxahachie, Texas, going to deal with tornadoes. Now, I can say this. I thought in moving to the Midwest, like where I live now in Columbus, that I would not have to deal with tornadoes as much. And yet, it was Tuesday morning. We had a tornado warning in our area and the rest, and we lost power for a few hours. No, Monday. It was Monday afternoon, morning, and then going into the evening and the rest. Lost power for a while. So I feel your pain. Please be safe. Obviously, not only do I understand, but if something happens and people have to drop off, I totally get that. Please be safe if you're in the tornado areas. We seem to be coming into that season, especially for those of you that are in the South. I thought being in the Midwest, it wouldn't affect me as much, but I've already had it once this year. We also had... so we do have tornadoes. That's true. We do have them up here. I just didn't assume there would be as many as already as has been experienced up here. Because been here almost a year now, and this is the second time I've had to go into our basement shelter because of a tornado warning over our area. Now, thankfully, no major damage, nothing like that. Just lost power the other day for a little bit, and I think that had more to do with the strong winds that came through. But earlier, it got to experience earlier this year, right before Christmas, a negative 30-degree wind chill, which was new. That was fun. I'll say I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the days at home with my family during that because no sane person goes out in that weather when it's that cold. But once it warmed up a little bit, really enjoyed the snow with the kids and had lots of fun right around the Christmas time. So I'm grateful to be back with you on this, what is a beautiful Thursday night here in Columbus. It's been just a stunningly beautiful day here. I have been under the weather for the last 2 days, and so as you might be able to tell with my voice, still kind of recovering from that, just a head cold and things of that nature, which has been no fun. More sapping of energy than anything, but I didn't want to put this off. It's been 2 weeks since we've been together, and I can also say I have met so many of you that are in this study at CYC this past weekend, and it's been really great to get to see you firsthand, to meet so many of you, and there are far more of you watching than I knew. Because some of you seem to be watching in groups. I'll give a special shout out to the Catamounts for Christ, Western Carolina University, those of you who might be tuning in watching that. A couple of the students that I got to meet from there that have watched a couple of the videos, or at least used one of them for part of their Bible classes and the rest. Love that. Was not expecting that in any way, shape, or form. Some of the students I met from Mississippi State and others that I got to spend time with, and so many of you that are tuning in that just came by the booth at CYC. We got to worship with 12,000 to 14,000 of our closest friends for 2 days there in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Fantastic weekend, just a wonderful time. Really enjoyed it, but really enjoyed getting to know so many of you. And I was not just pleasantly surprised, I was shocked by how many of you came up and told me that the rabbit hole was something that not only you were participating in, because, I see the numbers and I see the people that come and go and they watch each week and the rest like that, but you never know the impact something is having on people, and candidly, I put it mostly on you all. The questions you guys send in, the topics you ask for, the way that you interact with the chats and even the Facebook group and the posts at different times. You guys are what's making this a blessing, and what's making this something that I look forward to each and every week. My week has patterns now that it falls into that I really enjoy. You see, obviously, as a believer, especially a believer in Churches of Christ, Sundays are obviously a very important day of the week. It's the first day of the week. It's the Lord's Day. It's the day we gather to worship with our families, and it's a truly beautiful thing. And then, obviously, if you grew up in Churches of Christ, also you'll understand that Wednesday nights is also that little midweek push that gets you that midweek Bible study. And like most churches, we have a midweek Bible study that I really enjoy. I enjoy the Bible class times there on Wednesday nights. But during the week now, Monday nights, we with the Buckeyes for Christ on campus have an actual, like a Devo and a dinner, and we sing songs, we spend time together, we play games, and it's at the church building. And it's just fun. It's really enjoyable. And so I look forward to the Monday nights. And then Tuesday nights is really our outreach. On Tuesday nights, we spend a lot of time on campus at our office at Cohatch, which is on High Street, which is literally right on the south side of campus. And we get a chance to study through God's Word and study through different things. I appreciate you sharing that. So we're having just a fantastic time on Tuesday nights. And so I get to outreach to students. We've had new students just about every week that come and join us from all over the world. And so that's Monday nights, and then Tuesday nights, and obviously Wednesday nights. And then Thursday night is, in some ways, this is how I finish my week. I still tend to go in on Fridays for the office, but technically I'm supposed to take one day off a week. I'm not very good at that. Because obviously, Sundays is a work day in a lot of ways, especially as someone who teaches every Sunday morning, often preaches, and then has meetings in the afternoon. We have elders meetings on Sunday afternoons typically. And so Sundays are not necessarily a day off, even though my focus is not necessarily on a work. It's life. It's what it is to be in ministry. It's what it is to be a preacher, a teacher, a minister. And so I don't necessarily consider that a work day, but I understand that it is. There's a lot of times where you just have to be on, you have to be prepared, you have to be ready for whatever may come. And so I don't really, my weeks really start on different days, because Sunday is a day of preparation, Saturday's a day of preparation leading up into Sunday and the rest. So I try to take Fridays off in some way, but I've been terrible about it through the years, and I'm grateful my wife and especially my kids help remind me how important that is. So my week starting, in essence, preps on Saturday, leading into Sunday, leading into the Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. There's just been this beautiful rhythm I've fallen into, and I'm really enjoying it. And Thursdays are kind of a culmination of the week. And so I'm telling you, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your presence and for where you're at. Tonight, I swapped it up a little bit, obviously, because I changed out a couple weeks back. And so originally we were going to dive into the concept of angels and demons, or angels in particularly, and do demons. But I really like the idea of doing those together because of the fact that there's so much, there's kind of a nature that goes along with that. So next week we're going to dive into angels and demons. And this week, a lot of this came about from even conversations I had with so many of you while we were at CYC and other places. Is so many of you came up to me and said, hey, I know you through social media, and that got me thinking a little bit, the concept of knowing anyone. So there's a fantastic analogy that I saw years ago that I've used a few times in doing sermons that notes this, and I'll give it to you in the same way that I've done it before. So there is this young man by the name of Oliver Johnson. And Oliver is in his late 20s, lives in New York City. Fantastic young man from what I can tell. He's been up there. He is a student at NYU. He's about to graduate from NYU, like I said, with a degree in journalism. He has a dog named Spike. And I think it's named after Spike Lee. I think that's what he mentioned. And has lived in New York all of his life. He's kind of a local native New Yorker. Been there most of his life, spent most of his life there. But he's also done a lot of traveling, spent a lot of time traveling, especially as a study abroad with the NYU program over in Spain, and has been there a long time. He has a hope to work for the New York Times. That's his kind of dream for the future. And he's still single, has a great family life, and is connected to basically the Little Italy part of New York, and just really fantastic guy in general. And so I can introduce this person to you, and what I also need you to know right now is this. I have never met him before in my life. In fact, a few years back, I asked my wife to give me a first name of a person, and she said Oliver, and then I said, give me a last name, just a generic last name, and she said Johnson. And so I went on to Facebook, and I literally just searched for Oliver Johnson and found somebody that had no ties to me. We had no friends in common, no way, and that's who I just introduced you to. I just introduced you to Oliver Johnson. And now, you might think, it sounds like I know him fairly well, but I've never actually met him. In fact, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the behavior that I just described would be considered kind of stalking. Taking all of this information, all these things from people, and then actively acting like you know these individuals in some form or fashion. And social media has created a world where we often feel like we know people, but we don't actually know them. which is why I was so fascinated by meeting so many of you, especially at CYC, who said to me, I mean, I feel like I know you, and some of me wants to go, yes. In fact, I would argue some of you that know me more from like a study like this, where you can see me with my face and the rest of my gestures. I use my hands a lot. I'm growing up in Italy. I'm very much of an Italian in that manner. But I will note the fact that we don't really know people. In fact, social psychologists would actually say you know information about them, but you don't know them. And I would argue, even for a lot of us, that we fall into this category at times, where we know stuff about people, but we don't really know them. In the same way, and this is kind of the correlation that I'd like to make here, is that there's a lot of times where we make claims about Jesus and about the scriptures and the rest, where we'll say things like, I know God, but we don't really know him. Or I know Jesus, but I don't really know him. In fact, most of the time we'll just know things about him. In fact, if I remember a while back, I asked some students, I simply said, tell me about Jesus, and they gave me a lot of facts about his life, and I sat there kind of interested with the facts. Yeah, you could regurgitate a lot of facts, but tell me actually about him. Tell me about who he is. Not just the things that he's done along the way, but the personal aspect of really knowing someone is different than just knowing information. And so having had that conversation and that thought, one of the things somebody actually mentioned to me was that through a lot of my writings, they felt like they knew me fairly well through some of my writings. And for those of you who are new to at least my Facebook in some way or another, I do a lot of writing. Please send me a friend request. I think I have room on my friends list right now, and I don't mean that as a weird thing. It's Facebook switched me over to a public profile, whatever that is. And so I love when people are able to follow along and the rest, and I can share my life. I try to be as transparent as I can. But social media for me is a tool. It's an outreach. It's not meant to be about me nearly as much as I'm trying to share things out there to individuals, and even things like this to make it to where it's not just a self-centered concept, but instead it really is about how do I reach others to the glory of God. And I can be honest with you guys, I fail at this a lot because it's so easy to get caught up in things on social media. But I don't want us to miss out on that's the goal. So please follow along. Let me know who you are. I'd love to follow you and the rest. I try to do that with every person that comes in the group. Go in there and actually follow them or send a friend request if I can, to see what you guys are doing and how you're utilizing social media, because that fascinates me, how you might use your life to glorify God through the things that you're doing. But having said all that, and I go back to this concept of really knowing, sometimes we just know information, but we don't know who the individuals are. And I would love nothing more than to get to know more of you better, and even on a personal way. In fact, I often tell people, and I believe there's people in the group who can probably validate this if you want to put this in there. When I say, hey, if you're ever in our town or in our area, come by, see us, we'll put you up in the rest, that we mean that. In fact, for the first 7 years of our marriage, my wife and I had, for 6 years of our marriage, we had people living with us in some form or fashion. Man, I'm truly, yeah, Tyler. So that's a fascinating story. In fact, Tyler Rex, you ought to share how you and I met through all those years back. But I try to live that out. Is really what I'm trying to say. Is I try to be transparent and open, and when I say come and visit, come and stay with us, I mean that. And so that invitation is open to all of you, and I really do mean that. If I can be of support in any way. But beyond that, that led me to the thought process, as somebody told me recently, and it was probably one of the most humbling things that somebody's ever said. They said that when you write, specifically as a writer, that they said you seem to be doing your best to put out wisdom and not just information. And that was a humbling moment, because that is something I'm working on a consistent basis. Some of you may know the other day I posted one of my favorite little finds when I was a student at Harvard in the Widener Library, was this old paper from that was a student. He had got a B+ on a paper about, I forget who the author he was writing about was, but it may have been Rudyard Kipling. And the professor specifically noted that his writing, that he was he needed to be careful because he was on his way to becoming a voluminous, pompous, and orotund writer. That he wasn't, in essence, his writing style needed a lot of work. And of course, the student was T.S. Eliot, the noted poet, and the rest. And so it just reminded me that even the greatest poets and the greatest writers and people out there have to work on their craft, have to work on what they do each and every day. And that's something I've been actively trying to do on a consistent basis. And in fact, so much of it is trial and error. So much of it is failure along the way. But I do write a lot and I post a lot. And my father and I have had this conversation a few times on the premise of wisdom, of what wisdom looks like. Because a lot of people in our world have bought into the idea that wisdom ultimately is just knowledge. In fact, if you look at how our world is currently viewing wisdom, a lot of it just seems to be if you control the narrative of information, not even the information itself. And this has become the danger of the 21st century, the danger of the modern world, the danger of access on anything. A few years back, I specifically noted that one of the beauties of social media in the 21st century is that we have access to so much information at the touch of a phone, of a touch of a button. It's also one of the greatest dangers. You see, when we were given access to everything, everything was also given access to us. And that's one of the key components that I think we have lost out on. And because we suddenly have access to all this information, so many of us do not own or have a filter to define or to understand the difference between information and actual truth. And so instead, we just find ourselves overloaded constantly with just one thing after another, after another, after another. And it's so easy to lose track or lose what is real, what is true. And so I have a few things I want to share with you tonight on the premise of wisdom, and also some practical things that could possibly be done that I would love to just share with you all that may be of encouragement, and also what I hope some of you might take on, especially on the use of social media and how you share things and how you put things out there. So Proverbs 1:7, and I don't think any of you are shocked by the fact that I'm going to Proverbs when it comes to wisdom. But Proverbs 1:7 specifically says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." You see, this is kind of the core maxim of the book of Proverbs. It's this quest for wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. In fact, you'll also see that I believe it's in Psalm 111, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You see, knowledge and wisdom are closely tied together in Proverbs, but knowledge tends to focus on correct understanding of the world, of who you are, of who we are, of who God is, while wisdom is a skill set specifically acquired to how to utilize that knowledge. And that's not something we focus on or spend a lot of time on. In fact, I'll hear people will often say things like, I pray for wisdom. And I often wonder if that's not a lot like, I'm praying for patience, and then God gives you very frustrating people to deal with. And then you have to stop and realize, well, actually, what he gave me was more opportunities to practice at patience. And when you pray for wisdom in moments, I don't believe it's just this idea of, I know what to do. I believe that there's an action that takes place where you have to spend time really comprehending what is it that would be best for me to do. What's the best opportunity? You see, it's the old running joke about, knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. That's the old adage, in essence, of wisdom. But I don't want us to miss out on the concept of the fear of the Lord. And fear is an interesting terminology as it comes to wisdom, because especially the fear of the Lord, that we have this concept that fear is inherently a bad thing. As opposed to fear being the knowledge of what to do in light of something that is, but can either be terrifying or is something more powerful than you. So just as an example, with my children, around a stove or around a fire, we have this gas fireplace downstairs that my youngest daughter, just loves. And she loves to sit next to it. She loves to kind of cuddle up next to it and the rest. But we've had to tell her over and over again, you have to be careful. You have to have a healthy fear of fire, because fire can hurt you. It can burn you and the rest. And no parent ever wants their child to be hurt or burned. But there's something worse if I would never to say anything for him, or never teach her the healthy fear about that very premise, the fearing of that which can hurt you, or that which has more power over you. And this fear of the Lord, I think, is more closely tied to the very premise that God is God, and we miss this. God, in his righteousness, in his stunning nature, is so more powerful than us, not just in a little bit, in every bit. And yet we deal with him oftentimes like he's just kind of there. Some of us have this idea of God, of he's this grandfather figure that kind of chills and hangs out up there, and he's sitting in the rocking chair hoping for the best, waiting for us to show up, as if somehow, we've made him very human in a lot of ways. And we miss out on the beauty of and magnitude and power and the very nature of God himself. I look at Moses in Exodus when on Mount Sinai and the rest, that even to walk in front of Moses would have caused him in essence to die. That we forget this. We forget the power of this, power of who God is. And so this fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and then the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And this very premise of learning that God is in control, that God is over all things, I think is ultimately the key component to us knowing the difference between just having information and knowing what to do with it. You see, we live, as we've looked at all these other weeks, especially in the last couple weeks, looked at cults and looked at gender identity and looked at critical race theory and intersectionality and all these different things. We've talked about the viewpoint, the glasses that we put on how we view the world. And viewing the world in this methodology is so dangerous outside of knowing where wisdom and knowledge come from. They come from God. And so if we don't have the glasses on that say God is in control and God is all powerful and God is to be feared because he is the creator of all things, but he is all that is also good. He is the beginning of wisdom. He is the beginning of love. That if we miss that, we can end up worshiping other things or living our life doing other things or thinking that our gender, our sexuality, or our race, or our ethnicity, or all those things supersede all the wisdom or all the things that God has in store for us, as if our outward appearance or our gender itself is somehow what so defines us that we are unable to see who God is and what he has in store for us, his creation. And it's such a balance. You see, if we miss out on the fear of the Lord, then all of the rest of this kind of just falls apart. If we don't have a clear indication that God is in control and that all wisdom comes from him, then we miss out constantly on where true wisdom lies. Which is why I think we fall into so many traps around the world on pithy quotes and bumper sticker theologies and things of that nature. Now, I say this as someone, in fact, somebody joked with me the other day that I think they meant it in a good way. I hope they did. They said that I was a walking quote, that I could walk around. I could literally quote all these authors and the rest. And I think a lot of that has just to do with I post a lot of quotes from authors and the rest. And that is true. I tend to quote a lot of people mainly because I've never once, and I've said this a few times, I don't think I've ever had an original thought in my head. All of them have been brought about by others. Have been brought about by reading other great works or people who've come before. And I would never want to get to a point where I think that I'm creating something new more than I'm mining something ancient. That I believe the truths have always been there, and the truths have been laid forth by God. And it's more of the mining of it, to bringing it to life, than to try to find something new that might be out there, some ethereal concept that hasn't been discovered yet, especially in the concept of morality or philosophy or theology, which are kind of my fields of study. Michelangelo said it best a long time ago, and here's a quote for you from that standpoint. This isn't a direct quote, but his favorite form of art, believe it or not, was sculpting. Sculpting was his favorite thing. He found painting to be like just the lowest form of art in some ways, which I always found fascinating, because here you have one of the greatest painters of all time who actually didn't like the medium of painting, but he loved sculpting, because he used to say, in essence, that what his job was to release the image that God had already placed within the stone, was to find that which God had already placed within it. And that's been my view and my mindset, especially with the premise of fear of the Lord, when it comes to the searching of wisdom, of looking for wisdom. Is I'm not looking to create a brand new painting. I'm looking to mine out, to sculpt away, to find the beauty of that which God has already set forth in our world. And it's there. And it's beautiful. And it's life-bringing. And it's hope-bringing. And we miss this because wisdom has become this ethereal thing that just some people have, instead of it being a pursuit, something that you do, something that you work at. I often find wisdom to be in the same realm as creativity and innovation, because creativity, often somebody will say, well, that's a very creative person. I always laugh, and I was like, you find me a creative person, I find you somebody who is working hard every day. You see, one of my favorite quotes, I also note this quite a bit, is that worrying or anxiety is a terrible use of imagination. You see, when people tell me they don't have imagination, I'm like, have you ever worried about anything? They're like, oh yeah, I worry all the time. And I always tell them that's a terrible use of imagination. Because see, you're creating whole entire worlds with your anxieties and your worries, when you could be creating worlds filled with hope, when you could be creating stories of what could happen filled with joy, filled with passion, filled with compassion, filled with empathy, filled with good things and great wonders and all the rest. But instead, you allow your anxieties and your worries to create worlds that do not have to exist. And yet you do that over and over again. And so, like wisdom, with the knowledge that you have in the moment, it's not just this secret thing that you're trying to grab that's been out there. Instead, it's the unearthing, the breaking away of the outer form to find that which God has already set forth in there. And I'll give you an example. Excuse me if I drink every once in a while, but I'll give you an example of the first time I think I found wisdom, and from my father specifically. We had the opportunity, I had two different job offers at one point in time. One to go to Miami, Florida with a fantastic church, the Sunset Church of Christ down there, just wonderful people. Had a fantastic visit with them. And then I had another one in Wichita Falls with the Faith Village Church of Christ, also just fantastic people, loving churches. And I remember calling my dad and saying, I don't want to make the wrong decision. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I remember his specific moment when he said, if you go to Miami, are you going to glorify God with the best of your abilities? And I said, well, yes, sir. And he said, if you go to Wichita Falls, are you going to glorify God to the best of your abilities? I said, yes, sir. So then there's no wrong decision. Go and glorify God to the best of your abilities. And that moment of realizing that even in that thing, that the wisdom that he was laying before me was my actions were not going to change based off of where I was, or at least they shouldn't change based off of where I was. But instead, the encouragement was to focus on that which I could do in the moment, which was to glorify God to the best of my abilities. And if that was the case, there was no wrong decision. Now, I could look back later on and say, I wish we'd have done this, or I wish we'd have gone there. But that's not the same thing as having lacked wisdom in the moment. In fact, so much of our choices that we make in life, especially with wisdom, are bound in the very premise of who we are and what we're going to do with the information. And so, as many of you know, we chose to go to Faith Village and had a wonderful 2 years there with a wonderful church family that really helped us through a time and a season of life. And our littlest one, Duncan, was just born when we moved there, and that was his first house. I can still see him running around and the memories I have of that. And I choose, through my imagination, the choice of my imagination, to see nothing but the good, nothing but the wonderful things. In fact, that leads me to a verse I think you all know, that whatever is good, whatever is pure, think upon these things, think upon those things, which is why this, I think, creativity and innovation could tie in a lot of times with wisdom, because of the worlds that we create, the future possibilities that we create if God is at the forefront of that, if the fear of the Lord is at the forefront of that, it's not that you will always make the quote-unquote right decision, but you will always put God first, and in doing so, there will be wisdom. If God is at the center of it, there will be wisdom. And that, you can rest in that. And then all of a sudden, all the life's decisions and the things that come about will seem so much smaller in light of that. They will seem like the weight and the pressure will come off of you, because I really do believe that there is wisdom to be found in walking with God and simply making Him the forefront of how you make your decisions. Proverbs 3, 5 and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. I love that verse. I love the indications that it gives, especially with the concept of lean not on your own understanding. But in doing that, we are to all of our ways acknowledge Him. This goes back to, if God is at the forefront of all the decisions you make, then what is it that you worry about? You see, the wisdom in and of itself is putting God as the forefront of all the decisions that you make. And He will make your path straight. He will guide you in that. And there is wisdom in that. And so the last little one that I wanted to mention before I go into some quotes and some fun things I wanted to do tonight is actually from James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. And so this is the fascinating part that I think, because I think wisdom is often associated with old age, and there is an aspect where I do believe we are a culture that currently glorifies youth. And so we negate age to the side as if there's not wisdom there. Now, I say this also wanting to be very careful, because I've met a lot of childish grown-ups and adults. I said childish, not childlike, childish. And I've also met some adults who, spiritually speaking, are infants. Petty and small. On the other hand, I've met some youth who are deep and rich in their experiences in life. But predominantly, I can also say that while age is not an automatic sign of wisdom, that I like starting my assumption with people, especially those who are older and older than me and the rest. I assume wisdom is there. It should be, at least in life. And if you're an older Christian, man, I really hope that there is spiritual depth there, that there are minds and great things to be found within conversations. In fact, it's one of my greatest joys was to sit and have conversations with individuals from all over the world that just because a lot of times they're older. And I'll share two experiences that happened to me that it's still two of my favorite moments. I believe it was 1996. We were in, or maybe 1994. It was one of the two. We were in, I believe it was 1996, and we were back visiting in the States, and we were in Tallahassee, Florida, and one of my grandmother, I believe it was my great aunt, they were having a friend of theirs that was nearby that was having a birthday party that was older. She was turning 100, and I think it was 1996 because I believe the year they said she was born was 1896. And so I was fascinated just to meet somebody that was 100 years old. I was 12, 14, somewhere right around there. And she got up there, and I sat down next to her after everybody had talked to her, and we sang the happy birthday and all those things. And she said, young man, let me tell you about my father. And I said, okay, yes, ma'am. And she said, my father fought in the Civil War. And I remember sitting there going, I'm sorry, what? Did you say your father fought in the Civil War? She said, yes. Her father, she was born in 1896. Her father had her when he was in his 60s or 70s. Her mother was 19, 20 years old at the time. Married late in life again, that he had been a drummer boy in the fighting for the North during the Civil War. And I remember thinking, I am one generation removed from the Civil War. And the Civil War happened in the 1860s. And here we are in 1996 in Tallahassee, Florida. And here I was this one, and just the things that I wanted to ask her in that moment, and the conversations I remember having with her at that time, the things that she'd lived through, World War I, the World War II, all the rest of that. Her father would tell her stories about the Civil War. was just astounding. And then one from the church in particular. In fact, there's two from the church I'll share. I was at Faith Village in Wichita Falls, Texas, and I was sitting in the back. I had just taken my son out. He was very, very young. I think he was probably 6 months old. And we were back in this big lobby area in the back, and this older man came out in the middle of the service. I was back there. Duncan was a little fussy. And he came and sat down to me, and he talked to me for a few minutes and asked me about my son. And it was the first time I talked to him. I was new to the church there. Didn't really know him or recognize him. And he was very kind, but you could tell he's very quiet, wasn't used to talking to a lot of people. And one of the elders came up to me soon after and said, I can't believe you talked to him. And I said, I didn't know anything about it. He seemed really nice. One of our members, right? He's like, yeah, one of our members. But he doesn't usually talk to anybody. And I went, okay. I don't really know why. He came and talked to me and the rest. And he said, you don't understand. His family, they don't really talk to a lot of people. You see, that's Lee Harvey Oswald's brother. And all of a sudden I was having all the American history running through my head, and you guys can tell me if the chat if you know who that is. So Lee Harvey Oswald, his brother was a member of the church there, and I had that one Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning in the lobby talking with Lee Harvey Oswald's brother there at the church, and I was just blown away by these little connections of what happens when you connect with people, especially in life and history and American history and the rest. And so I'll be fascinated to know if anybody knows who Lee Harvey Oswald is. See if I have any American historians in here. But it's just one of those moments that I was like, man, you never know who you're going to be talking to, or the history, the wisdom that you might learn from individuals of life and the things that are happening around you. So anyways, it was just one of those fascinating moments. And then I'll share one more with you that was in Buford, Georgia. I had a man came up to me and said, hey, your seniors graduating, I'd like to come and speak to them. And I said, I would love that. That would be fantastic. What would you like to speak to them about? And he said, well, have you ever heard of Drummond Aerospace? And I went, no. And he said, have you ever heard of the space race? And I said, I did. And he said, I used to work for Drummond Aerospace, and Drummond Aerospace was in charge of building the lunar module that landed on the moon. And I was like, oh my goodness, yes. And so he came to speak for the graduating seniors. He was a member of our church there. And there are 3 models of the lunar module that were originally made. One is in the Smithsonian, one is at the Kennedy Library, and the other one Mr. Krippner owns. And so he brought slides that were original slides that had been taken from photographs from out in outer space and the rest that had never been seen before, showed them Turkey. I mean, just fact, like you never know who you're going to run into with the wisdom and life and the rest that might be sitting even in your pews each and every Sunday. And so this is just 3 individuals. So from somebody who, and yes, his Lee Harvey Oswald was apparently was the one who shot JFK all those years ago. So his brother was a member of the church in Wichita Falls, Texas. When he passed away a few years later, that's a whole other story that I will share one other day. But I wanted to note specifically the concept: you never know who's sitting there and the wisdom of their life and the things they've experienced unless you ask. And because we live in such a youth-driven culture, we often miss out on all these stories and all these connections that are available to us. That I think it's important for us to know that the wisdom that might be sitting in your pews should be consumed, should be talked to, should be spent time with in some form or fashion. So, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. If you're in need, ask God, and don't doubt. In fact, James goes on to say that, and don't doubt like somebody who looks at their image in a mirror and then walks away and forgets what they look like. Ask God for wisdom and go for it. That would be a key component. Expect that God will help you and guide you in your answers. If you have specific things that are going on in your life, ask God for wisdom. Talk to others. Spend time. Seek answers for it. But never forget that if your ultimate goal is, I want to glorify God to the best of my abilities, that God will guide you in ways that you cannot expect, including offering you answers that you did not think were real at the moment, or did not think it was even possible at the moment. So, that's what I wanted to note on wisdom. I mentioned earlier that I do a lot of writing, and somebody asked me recently, how do I start a lot of the writing? I'll always have typically like a quote or something along the way. I do write a lot in the mornings, especially, and I try to get into a point where I'll read a quote or think about something and then spend time thinking about it, and then I'll write out specifically my thoughts about what's going on, what I see in that. And so just recently, in fact I think it was earlier yesterday, I sat down to write out a quote that I read that I thought was just fascinating. And it's from C.S. Lewis, and you may have all heard it before, but it says, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable." And so off of that, and this is where this has been a practice of mine recently, is I would want to take these quotes, these things that I was reading, and going, okay, what is the truth that is in this? What is the thing that I can grab from this, that I can then share with others? What is the wisdom to be found in this beyond just the beautiful things that the C.S. Lewis writes? And also, and this is a careful thing, not everything C.S. Lewis or any author has ever written is going to be true outside of Scripture. So you also have to question, is this real? Is this true? You see, sometimes people say things just to be silly, or sometimes things are written in satire, sometimes things are written as sarcasm, and you have to know whether or not something is true or not. So it should be tested first and foremost. Is this true? You see, if God is wisdom and the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, then I need to seek God, and if God is at the forefront of what I'm doing, and then I read something like that, and I ask myself, is this true? Okay, if it is true, what can be shared, what can be gleaned, what could be written? Because I do believe that we need more writers, more people who share, more people who utilize the beauty of not just the English language, but language on the whole, to share the Word of God. You see, Jesus is the greatest storyteller of all time. Always was, always has been. He has created all things, and in all things have been created through him. And so every story, every concept comes from the creative mind of God. And so with that in mind, to take that which has been set forth, what is the beautiful painting that can be painted? What is the sculpture that can be brought to life out of the stone? And so I took that quote and I wrote this: "Love, a word so misused, misconstrued, stolen, abused, and deconstructed that we often miss out on its true intrinsic beauty. You see, love cannot simply be an emotion, for that would make it petty. Love cannot simply be a decision, for that would make it easy. Love cannot simply be a philosophy, for that would mean some wouldn't need it. Love cannot simply be an impulse, because then someone wouldn't feel it. To love someone isn't just an emotion, a choice, a philosophy of life, or an impulse. It is within the God-given combination of these ideals, of these deep roots, that we find its totality. Love was never meant to stand on its own. It was always meant to stand rooted in its intrinsic nature, created by God that we may walk with Him, feel Him, desire Him, and search for Him. In the same way, His love overflows and allows us the same richness in our search for relationships in this world. So, I shall go forth into this world looking for depth in my relationships, for true roots in my friendships, to love all mankind, to desire its redemption, to dream of its return from rebellion towards a loving God, and to aspire to personal depth in every conversation. Today, thus, I shall ask this question: how are you, old friend? And I shall truly desire an answer from the people I speak to." You see, this goes back to the premise of knowing each other, knowing one another. You see, it's one thing to have information about others. It's one thing to know the information that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. To know and understand wisdom is to go, okay, yes, but then now what? And the now what from that point means that I have to actually care. I have to do something. Wisdom calls me to act. It calls me to actually reach out to someone, to talk to them, to get to know them on a personal level, individually. And off of that, to be able to truly breathe in the richness and the depth of what life has to offer in relationships. And for each one of you that are there, and I can truly say this, it is my hope that I get to know you in this life in the same way that God wants us to know each other, to know the ups and downs, the faults, the failures, the issues that may come and they may go. When I say something like, I hope you're doing well, I want to mean it. I don't want it to just be something you write out on Facebook or to put out there. I want there to be wisdom in that. I want that to mean, like when I say I pray for you or I'm praying for you, that there are words attached to that there is an action attached to it, because knowledge of just saying, oh, I'm praying for you, or I hope you well, or I wish you well. In fact, James says this. Some of you say, if you say, I wish you well to someone when he has no clothes and the rest, and you do nothing to help him, what good is that to him? But instead that you actually do that which you say you are going to be doing. Wisdom calls for us to actually do more. And so maybe that's my encouragement this week as you seek wisdom. And it is my prayer, and what I ask of you all is to pray that I will seek wisdom in my life on a daily basis, that I will go beyond just that which I read, that which I see, the information that is placed before me, but that I will learn how to utilize it, how to put it to light, how to always keep the fear of the Lord at the forefront, always to keep the depth of what it means to honor God at the forefront, and in doing so, all the things that we have, whether it's social media, my family life, my friends, the ministry world, and the rest, that all of it may be bathed in love and in wisdom. And wisdom is work. It's putting to work that which we know to be right, that which we know to be true. In fact, the greatest wisdom that I think would bring us all closer to God is if each one of us realized this week the power that we have to share the gospel with others. That you have. To have small conversations with people like, hey, I've never said this before to you, but you may not know this, but I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and I just want you to know that if you ever have any questions, or if I can serve you in any way, like, how's your family? Are you okay? And then mean it. And when you mean it, to follow up and say, well, why don't you come and let's sit down, let's have dinner on Monday night, and let's talk about God and what questions you might have, or be ready that God will call you into action, because wisdom is often putting information into action. And that's my hope. That's my hope, that this week that you will be challenged in that, and that you will grow in that, and that you will push yourself in that. And that as you seek wisdom, maybe another practice, and it's one that I've been working on, that I hope that others will join me in a lot of ways, is in writing and in sharing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. In fact, somebody told me the other day, and it saddened me in a lot of ways. They said, I like to write and everything, but I see the way that you write, and I don't want to take or copy that which you're doing and do it elsewhere. And I went, no, please do. Absolutely, please do. Do that. We need more of that. We need more people who are willing to step out there and share the things that are going on in their life that are being real, but always with the emphasis of pushing people to Jesus. And so, do that. Share that even more. And don't be afraid of trying something new. Now, notice I didn't say something sinful. I said something new. And the newness always needs to be in walking in wisdom, trying something to reach others for the glory of God. Because again, if you're walking with God and you're focusing on God and you're doing that which you know God would want you to do, then don't be afraid. You say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of the wisdom. But if you have that fear in the right places, then the rest of the world is fine. Even with the pain and suffering and all the things that could go wrong, I can rest in God, because I know where my fear lies, and my fear lies at the feet of the one who made it all. And so I can rest in the knowledge that he has offered me salvation through his Son. And it's that knowledge that I want others to have. So that's what I wanted to lay before you tonight. Wisdom. Pray that I will continue to seek it each and every day, and that's going to be my prayer for you. In fact, this week, the 150 plus people that are in the group right now, the other 700 of you that seem to be watching in other areas or watching online through somebody's profile, I want to do the same. If you'll send me your name, put it in the chat, or if you've got something personal that you want prayed for, I want to pray for you. If you want to share in the group and just say, hey, here's what's going on in my life, I need the prayers, or I need support, or you need just some wisdom in particular, feel free to reach out. Feel free to reach out to others in the group. Just know that we're there for you. We want to support you in those things, and I want to guide you with that. Now, I will close out by giving you one of my favorite quotes, because not all information or knowledge or quotes are great wisdom. Some are just humorous. So G.K. Chesterton, Gilbert Keith Chesterton, if you've ever read him, is one of my favorite I call him my little prophet from the late 1900s, had a great quote, which I think is just fantastic to close out the night, which is to say this, that poets have been mysteriously silent on the subject of cheese. Learn to not take yourself so serious all the time, too. That's one of the things I loved about him, is that he would often have these pithy little funny quotes, and even though the rest of his work was deep and the rest, that he was still childlike in his wonder and childlike in his faith, and I love that about him, and so that's my constant hope, not only for myself, but for each one of you. I hope you have a wonderful week. Next week, angels and demons. We're diving into the deep end of the pool again, but I hope this little mini break of wisdom, of seeking wisdom, will be of great value to you as we go forward. If you have any other questions, if you're watching this later, please let us know where you're tuning in from, if we can serve you in any way. As I like to close out, I'll say this. I love you all. I wish you all the best. I'll be praying for you this week by name, and know that if I could serve you in any way, we're here for you. If you're ever in our area, come by, see us. We got a house and place to stay. We'd love to see them. We'll see you all next week.